Talk 8. Frustration. Today, I'd like to talk about something very ordinary. Not enlightenment, not deep philosophy, just frustration. Because frustration isn't new, it isn't modern, and it certainly isn't any kind of personal failure. It's ancient, it's ordinary, and it turns up quietly mixed in with daily life. So, come for a short walk with me early morning. There's a man making roti, rolling out dough balls in flour. Mopeds and motorbikes parked right across the pavement. Those slightly soft metal sheets over drains, you step on them, but never with full confidence. It's still dark, cool, peaceful. No traffic yet. People delivering things early. The market just beginning to wake up. A motorbike cutting around a corner. An elderly Chinese lady crossing the road with her granddaughter. A fruit stall holder sweeping the gutter. Nothing special. Just life as it actually is. And then the day really starts. The sun comes up. And along with the comforts and pleasures come little frustrations. A bottle lid that won't open, no matter how patiently you twist it. Plastic packaging that tears everywhere except where it's meant to. USB plugs that take 3 attempts before going in the right way. Spectacles sliding down your nose at exactly the wrong moment. A table that rocks and slightly, just enough to be annoying. A door that sticks, but only when people are watching. Sticky tape, when you can never find the beginning. Power sockets, never where you need them. Unlocking a door while carrying far too many bags. Washing machines with mysterious symbols and very long cycles. Tupperware lids that never seem to match the container. Supermarket trolleys with one wheel that has its own spiritual practice. Headphone cables that tangle instantly. Labels that peel off, leaving a gluey mess behind. Keys that disappear precisely when you're in a hurry. Passwords rejected, even though you're sure they're right. Autocorrect, changing words into something embarrassing or irrelevant. Dropping something, and as you bend to pick it up, watching it slowly roll away, out of reach. This is where frustration actually lives. Not in crisis, but in things just not quite cooperating, and we all meet it. I've noticed over the years that many of the things that unsettled us aren't planned, they just happen. Things turn up out of the blue. In the Buddha's teaching, there's a simple image for this. He talks about 2 arrows. The first arrow is the thing that happens. The second arrow is what the mind adds. And the second arrow doesn't arrive in just one form. Sometimes it's, why me? Sometimes it's replaying the moment again and again. Sometimes it's blaming yourself. Sometimes it's blaming the system or other people. Sometimes it's the demand that this shouldn't be happening at all. Sometimes it's the rush to fix, to force, to make it stop. Sometimes it's embarrassment that lingers long after the moment is over. And sometimes it's the quiet hardening, becoming a little quicker to snap, a little less patient. None of that is the original problem. That's the second arrow. And most of our suffering lives there. I remember once when I was standing mindfully in a meditation center, when part of an overhanging roof suddenly collapsed in front of me nearby. I went to warn the office. I said, "Those roof panels are only held up by a couple of screws, and the wood's pretty rotten." The builder was actually there, and he didn't seem very pleased to hear this. In fact, he responded in a rather peculiar way, whichever way you look at it. He sat down with his wife and had lunch directly underneath the remaining panels, as if to demonstrate that the laws of gravity, were clearly exaggerated and did not apply to him. Nothing more happened. The roof stayed up. Lunch was eaten. But inside, something interesting was going on, because the roof wasn't the real issue, and the builder wasn't either. What mattered was what was starting to form inside me. That tightening, that little surge of irritation, that sense of, why won't people just listen? And that's often how frustration begins. Not with danger, but with things not behaving as they should. Sometimes it's even gentler than that. I once heard a story about a man at a public garden event. He was introduced to the mayor's wife. She was eating ice cream from a glass bowl, holding it up close to her mouth. As he was talking to her, he noticed a long black curly hair in her ice cream. Trying to be helpful, he said, "Oh, excuse me," and reached out to remove it. As he pulled, only then did he realize it wasn't just kind of in the ice cream at all. It was attached to her upper lip. And nothing terrible happened and no one was harmed. But I imagine that he replayed that moment for quite some time. That's another kind of frustration. Not irritation, but embarrassment. The mind going back again and again to something already finished. And when you read history, you see this hasn't changed much. People have always complained about small things. Old letters and diaries are full of it. Even in ancient Greece, there are records of elders complaining. Socrates, via Plato, laments the declining manners and respect of the younger generation, stating, "The children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for elders and love chatter in place of exercise." Civilizations rise and fall, but irritation carries on, quite happily, in the background. So as you hear these stories, you might notice a certain reassurance. What frustrates you today is not a personal failure, not a modern problem. It's not even a sign of getting old. It's just part of being human. Life has never been fully cooperative, and the mind has always been quick to complain. Not because life is awful, but because it's unfinished, it's imperfect, and a bit unreliable. So you might gently ask yourself, where does this show up most often now? Not in big crises, but in small interruptions, delays, and misunderstandings. Whether those moments feel heavy because they're new, or because they're so familiar. Sometimes just recognizing how ordinary frustration is creates a little space. Don't need to fix it, don't need to solve it. And in that space, a little humor and a little kindness can arise by themselves. Anapanasati, joy, and the always available object. And there's something quietly joyful about this training, because it gives you an object that is always with you. You don't have to wait for the right conditions. You don't have to arrange your life. You don't have to fix the trolley, the cling film, the door, the phone. The breath is already here, and the breath is flexible. Some people like to focus on the touch at the nostrils, the coolness and warmth, a fine, simple point. Others prefer the throat, where you can feel the movement more clearly. Others prefer the belly, the soft rising and falling. And some people, especially when the mind is busy, prefer the whole body. Breathing in, aware of the whole body. Breathing out, aware of the whole body. That choice matters because when frustration is present, the mind often feels cornered. It feels like there is no good place to stand. And mindfulness of breathing, Anapanasati, gives you a place to stand that is not dependent on the world cooperating. You can choose a small, steady space. You can choose a wide, steady place. Either way, you're not helpless. And this is where it becomes joyful. Not the joy of excitement, not the joy of getting what you want, but the quiet relief of discovering, I can stay. I can be here. I don't have to fight. The Buddha didn't present this as a luxury practice. It's practical. When irritation is building, you don't need a complicated solution. You need a safe, friendly home base. And the breath can become that. So you might experiment. When the mind feels tight, choose a wider field. Breathing in, feel the body breathing. Breathing out, feel the body breathing. When the mind feels scattered, choose a smaller point. Breathing in, the touch. Breathing out, the touch. And you may notice something simple. The frustrations haven't vanished, but the mind is no longer feeding them in the same way. There's a line from Wayne Dyer that I've always liked. He said, "Needing to have things perfect is the surest way to immobilize yourself with frustration." That's worth pausing on, because the training isn't about making life perfect. It's about learning to move wisely before resentment sets in. Small frustrations are not the problem. What we do with them is. If they're met early, gently, they pass. If they're fed, they harden. Once they harden, they start recruiting allies. Frustration doesn't just live inside individuals. It spreads, it becomes shared, and over time, it can settle into culture. Bill Bryson once pointed out how casually irritation gets encoded into language. Foreigners are described as contamination. Neighbors get turned into jokes. Whole groups reduced to a punchline. What's interesting isn't the humor itself, it's how normal it starts to feel. When everyone is carrying the same irritation, it no longer gets questioned. Ill will becomes easier to hold when it's common. And the danger isn't other cultures doing this. It's noticing how quickly we borrow irritation ourselves without ever checking it. So here's a quiet training cue. Notice when frustration feels justified, simply because it's familiar. Someone once described Italian parking as if order had given up, or a parking competition for blind people. Cars at odd angles, half on pavements, blocking everything. But what's really interesting isn't the parking, it's what happens in our own mind when things don't behave as they should. Irritation doesn't stop at noticing. It escalates, sharpens, and sometimes it starts to enjoy itself. So another training cue, just as gentle, notice when irritation turns into a kind of entertainment, mocking. That's usually the moment when it's no longer harmless. So there's a very simple practice you can try right there. Nothing fancy or complicated, no special beliefs. Just working with what's already happening. The Buddha also noticed that when irritation starts looping, there are only a few ways the mind actually deals with it. Sometimes we change the channel, put attention somewhere else. Sometimes we look at the cost, what this way of thinking does to us. Sometimes we simply stop feeding it and let it fade. Sometimes we soften the body and let the thought lose its grip. And sometimes we hold the mind steady, firmly, but kindly, until it settles. Different moments call for different moves. What matters is catching irritation early before it hardens into something heavier. So let's actually try this for a moment, not as an idea, but as an experience. No need to close the eyes unless you really want to. Just a small settling. Feel the contact with the floor, the weight of the body, the points of pressure, feet, legs, seat, hands. Notice the simple fact of touch, not thinking about it, feeling it. Now notice the air on the skin, maybe on the face, maybe on the arms, maybe at the nostrils, cool or warm, moving or still. Notice clothing touching the body, where it rests, where it pulls slightly, where it is loose. Again, there's nothing to fix, just knowing. Now let sounds be present, not as a problem, not as a disturbance, just sound. Near sound, far sound, a voice, a fan, birds, maybe a distant motorbike. Or just silence with small movements inside it. And somewhere in all of that, notice breathing, not forcing it, not improving it, just recognizing, breathing in, breathing out. If you like, feel it at the nose, or at the throat, or at the belly, or as the whole body breathing. And if frustration is present in any form, a little tightening, a little restlessness, just include it in awareness. Breathing in, knowing it. Breathing out, softening around it. Not making it wrong, not making yourself wrong. Just letting the system settle. And you might notice a small shift, not dramatic. Just a little more space, a little less hurry, a little less argument with experience. That's the beginning of training. Not a trance, but a special state. Just being here on purpose. And that on purpose is what changes things. When frustration appears, notice it clearly. That tightening in the chest, the jaw, the shoulders. And as you breathe in, you acknowledge it. Breathing in, this is frustration. Not judging it, pushing it away, just allowing it to be known. Then as you breathe out, you offer a wider perspective. Breathing out, may this soften, or this doesn't have to become ill will, or simply others experience this too. Breathing in, you allow the unpleasant feeling to be present. Breathing out, you incline the mind towards patience, kindness, or ease. Nothing forced, nothing imagined. Just gently changing what you feel, just changing what you feed. The situation outside hasn't changed, but the direction of the mind has. Often that's enough. I remember arriving at Singapore airport late at night from Australia. I was tired, a bit tense, looking forward to a taxi ride and a quiet arrival at the temple. I started filling in the arrival form on an iPad provided by the airport. Name, date of birth, passport details. I began filling it in just before midnight, and by the time I'd finished, It was after midnight. The screen informed me that what I had done was impossible. I couldn't have arrived on one day and still be filling in the form on the next. There was no one around, no explanation, no help button, just a silent machine telling me I was wrong. I felt it there, that tightening, that urge to argue with the screen. So I stopped. I cancelled the form, I took a breath, and started again slowly, calmly, and this time it worked. Nothing changed in the system, only the way I met it. So let's slow down here, because this is subtle, and subtle things are easily missed. When we're frustrated, there's often speed, urgency inside. The mind rushes, the body tightens, the story starts forming. And it can feel as if we have to do something immediately. But there's another option, a stilling option, not passive, not collapsing, just not adding extra movement. So for a few breaths, do less. Let the shoulders drop a little. Let the jaw unclench a little. Let the hands soften. And just feel the next breath. Pause. Feel the out-breath. The small letting go that happens by itself. Pause. And notice the difference between the problem and the extra pressure. The problem is the thing that isn't working. The extra pressure is the demand that it should work right now. Or the demand that you shouldn't feel annoyed. Or the demand that you should be better than this. Pause. This is why the Buddha's training is so kind. It doesn't say, don't feel anything. It says, see what you're adding. See what you're feeding. And this is also where patience becomes real. Not as a virtue to admire, but as a pace, a bodily pace, a mental pace. So you might practice it in small doses, in the kitchen, with a lid, with a phone that won't cooperate, with a form that resets at midnight. You take one breath, you soften one place in the body. You don't rush into the second arrow. And sometimes the most meaningful part of practice is simply not becoming someone with a heart that is harder, not letting small annoyances accumulate into a harder way of living, because the outer world stays unreliable. But the heart doesn't have to become brittle, and when the heart stays soft, daily life becomes workable again. Not perfect, but workable. Not polished, but human. Back to the early morning, the man making roti, rolling out the dough balls, mopeds and motorbikes blocking the pavement, metal sheets over drains you're never quite sure you can stand on, the darkness just before dawn, people delivering things early, the market still setting up, life as it actually is, just life. And then the smaller frustrations creep in, trying to find the end of cling film, folding laundry so it fits the drawer, a window that sticks, spectacles that won't stay clean, walking into a room and forgetting why you're there. On their own, none of these matters very much, but together they tell a story, not about objects, but about expectations. And this is where the Dhamma quietly lives, not in crises, but in these ordinary moments when things resist us, just enough to be noticed, and just noticing is enough.